We are down the pipe and out of the box. Welcome to Dear Watchers, an omniversal comic book podcast, usually, where we do a deep dive into the multiverse.
We are traveling with you through the stories and the worlds and the dream houses that make up an omniverse of fictional realities we all love. And your watchers on this journey are me, Ken.
And me, it's me, Barbio.
I knew that was inevitable today, that I'd have to hear you doing that.
So you saved it for me. That's so lovely of you. And before we begin our trip today, Guido, what's new in our little section of the multiverse?
Last week, we wrapped up our Age of Apocalypse parts 1 through 3, so you now have a complete 3-part episode, the first time we've ever done that, so you can go listen to the multi-parts, listen to them together, listen to them again, but that's not all. There's more on Age of Apocalypse coming soon with a very special guest, so keep an eye out. It's also still our summer of giveaways. It feels like summer's ending, but still is. And we have one more giveaway, as our regular listeners know. And as always, we want to hear from you. So send us your emails, send us your DMs, reach out to us on all social media at Dear Watchers or podcast at dearwatchers.com for email.
And if you're joining us for the first time, we have 3 parts of our journey through the multiverse today: origins of the story, exploring multiversity, and pondering possibilities. So thank you for joining us on today's journey.
And remember to please leave a review wherever you're listening, or maybe even someplace else that you're not listening. Just review us. Thank you.
And with that, dear watchers, welcome to episode 112. Yeah, that's how you say it. And let's check out what's happening in the Omniverse with our travels to today's alternate universe. Today we are hopping in our pink convertible and traveling down a big green pipe to find out the answer to the question, what if Barbie and Super Mario Brothers blew away Hollywood with multiversal mayhem?
Ooh. I should have downloaded some sound effects for each, but I didn't. So listeners, prepare yourself.
Should I just do
no
them?
Barbie and no do. That one's easy, but I don't know for Barbie what we're gonna do. Can you do a Lizzo singing the Pink song?
Oh, I was just thinking. Yeah. Oh, I don't. Now I can't remember those. But I'm still Ken, and to be a 10. Yes.
All right. Today we are talking about the 2023 films Barbie and Super Mario Brothers. They are 2 of the biggest grossing films at the domestic box office and abroad, and both are kind of multiversal stories. They don't interconnect. We're not treating them as one multiverse. Our multiverse today, I guess, is actually our current Earth, where there is an influx of billion-dollar making multiversal movies. Mm-hmm. And we've talked a few times in the past about the influx of multiversal content. And on our 100th episode, we looked back at why we think Hollywood might be so obsessed with multiverses right now. Is there anything new you're thinking about generally before we get into these 2 pieces?
I think just why Hollywood approaches it is it can take these other worlds and still give them a level of familiarity. So it's not just placing us in these other universes, just dropping us in. It's kind of easing us in because, we're still kind of in our world, but now we're in these other worlds. Do you think that's kind of part of it? It's a little bit of a spoon feeding us the multiverse?
I don't know. I don't have much to say because I want to save it because it has to do with these 2 pieces. I think these 2 pieces might represent a shift in our culture of multiverses. So, yeah.
Well, these 2 pieces are Barbie and Mario, or Mario, depending on how you say his name.
Yeah. I'm sure that's controversial to someone.
I was told in New Jersey we say Mario even though it should be Mario, so maybe that's my New Jersey roots. But we're talking about those 2 properties, and before we get into each of their histories, let's talk about our histories with them. So, Guido, what was your background with Barbie?
Barbie, I played with as a kid because I have 2 pretty significantly older sisters, so they had their 70s Barbies and the dream house, and they were all in the attic, and I would play with them. And my next door neighbor, who I mentioned on the Gem episode, Alex, and I would sometimes incorporate her Barbies into our play, but I was never into it. It's not like I craved having my own Barbie. I certainly never watched any of the other Barbie media that was out there. I saw it as bland and boring. I think it wasn't obviously a gender thing. I liked Gem, I liked She-Ra, but Barbie did not feel like it was a thing for me. What about you and Barbie?
I never played with Barbie because I had no siblings, so I can't even use that as like, oh, I got it from my I was able to play with my siblings.
And
Don't
even like
remember.
you have two close extended family members who are boys, so they
Yes,
might
that's
not have had
true.
Barbies. Yeah.
And I think you just said it, which I kind of agree with. I think even if I could have played with him, I don't think it really interested me because Turtles, Ninja Turtles, Ghostbusters, we were dealing with like the fantastical. There was mutants, there was powers involved. I don't know if I really wanted to just pretend to be a doctor or an astronaut. I don't remember doing that much in like make-believe play either. I think I always wanted to be a superhero. So maybe Barbie almost seemed too earthbound for me.
Though I played teacher as a kid, and look at me now.
That's
A teacher,
true.
and I still didn't like Barbie, even though I was playing really boring things like school teacher. So yeah. But what about Mario for you?
Oh, Mario, though, was a completely different story. I was super into Mario. I think, no pun intended, or that's not a pun, but what play on words.
Whatever. Yeah.
Super Mario World, the one for the SNES, that was maybe my first video game, period. And I played the heck out of that, beat that. And then Super Mario 64, my first game for that console. I remember watching the live action TV show, which we'll talk a little bit about. But overall, I was just always a big Mario fan. What about you? Because you even had the NES that predates me a little bit too
I am,
much.
as our listeners know, I am older, and so I got the better experiences of the 80s, and that in this case included NES. And yeah, I mean, Mario was just a staple of anyone my age's life. And for me, I did own an NES and play all of the Marios on it. I would play with friends. It was that kind of thing where you would just watch each other play for hours and then
Totally.
switch on and off because there wasn't co-op at that point in Mario. And I loved it. It was fun. It's to this day, I mean, they don't really make side-scrolling platformers that are not mobile games so much today, but like that is my type of game, I think, because I just grew up with that two-dimensional
Totally.
scrolling. And so I watched the TV show, I owned some of the comics, I was very into Mario, but Mario didn't have much of a world to get into, actually. And I'll want to talk about that with the movie. So my love died like when I walked away from the video games. Like I wasn't thinking about Mario anymore, which is not true. Obviously, I was thinking about She-Ra even when I wasn't watching the TV show or playing with the She-Ra action figures. So yeah,
Even his contemporaries in video games like Legends of Zelda and Star Fox, they had like deeper benches of worlds and other places and more backstories. Mario, you never even really knew what his backstory was, so it wasn't a world that you could super easily get into.
No, you keep saying super easily get into. You need to stop saying super in this episode because you're going to run out of chances to use it. So, yeah, I think more familiar with Mario than most people, but certainly not a super fan, and not at all familiar with Barbie. So I think we're about the same on each of those.
Well, let's get familiar by powering up to our first segment, Origins of the Story.
Right now, on this very show, you're going to get the answer to all your questions. Our amazing story begins a few years ago.
Of course, before they became films, both Barbie and Mario began their lives in other mediums. So before we get into their movie backstories, we're going to give you some very, very, very abbreviated histories of these two
I know we
iconic
could do
characters.
multiple episodes
Oh my
just about
gosh.
these,
And
but
write books, of course. But yeah, let's start with Barbie, perhaps the world's most famous doll.
yes. Well, as people who've seen her movie got some of, we know she was created by Ruth Handler and the company that Ruth founded with her husband Elliot and business partner Matt Matson, Mattel. And Barbie, you could say, perhaps has her root in comics because Handler based Barbie on the German Lily doll, which was based on a comic strip. And in
Oh, I
fact,
had
there
no
was
idea.
a lawsuit the Lily doll had put against Mattel, but that was settled out of court a long time ago. So Barbie was very successful very early, and one of the first toys to have a television ad campaign, became a staple probably of every young girl at that point. And Barbie's boyfriend Ken debuted in 1961, named for another of Ruth's children, so that's a little strange. But by 2006, Mattel claimed that 3 Barbies were sold every second. So at that point,
Whoa,
there are
that's a lot of
thousands
Barbies.
of the dolls. Yes, and just hundreds of thousands, I'm sure millions at this point, being sold. And Barbie became more diverse starting in the 1980s. And in 2019, by 2019, the best-selling Barbie was black, and Barbie has, at this point, over 35 skin tones and over 255 jobs, and just
She can't
countless
hold
other
one down.
iterations. No. And in recent years, Barbie's sales had been sagging, and interesting to wonder why, and if
Ooh.
it, is the American Girl doll or some other. I mean, that's not a new phenomenon, but or just cell phones or iPads
Yeah,
or
there's a
what
lot
it
of
is that have
competition out
taken
there
girls
these
away
days.
from Barbies. Yeah. But I'm sure that is definitely changing. The market is surely growing thanks to the movie. And there's a whole backstory to the character, including a life in Wisconsin and a last name and parents, but it might not be canon. Who even knows what Barbie
Yeah.
canon is? And we're not going to get into that at this point.
And I had no idea that she even had a background in comics. I want to check out that comic to see if there's any Barbieisms that I can even pick up from the Lily character.
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah. Well, I'm assuming you have to read French to read it.
That's true. Or German. But yeah.
Oh,
which
German.
I know neither, but I do know Brooklynese as a New Yorker. So let's head to Brooklyn and learn a little bit more about Mario, who was created by the high guru of Nintendo. Guido, do you know how to pronounce his name? Shigeru Miyamoto.
Miyamoto. I mean, everyone knows Miyamoto. Any nerd
yeah.
knows Miyamoto. So.
Not nerdy
First
enough.
name less so, but Miyamoto, legend.
And he also created Legends of Zelda, Donkey Kong, and Star Fox. So, as you said, complete legend. Mario first appeared in Donkey Kong in 1981, but his name was Jumpman in the English instructions. There's a little Easter egg of that in the new movie. And Miyamoto planned to actually name the character Mr. Video. And he himself said if he had named the character of Mr. Video, you would have never heard of this character again. And Mario was given his own arcade game in 1983 with Mario Brothers, followed by the NES game Super Mario Brothers in 1985. Since then, Mario and his brother Luigi, who premiered in 1983, have appeared in countless games, many of which are some of the most beloved and acclaimed titles of all time. And as of 2020,
others are like Mario Paint.
And yeah, I loved Mario Paint.
People who had it loved it, but that game will never have a resurgence.
No, there was a little side game in it where you had to kill a fly with a fly swatter. I loved it, obsessed. But as of 2022, Mario games are estimated to have sold over 830 million units. So that is a lot of video
I
games.
wish we could find the total number of Barbies ever sold and see if it's comparable.
There was one every 3 or 3 every 1 second or whatever they
I know,
said.
but
I don't know
I
how
wonder. There's 830
verifiable.
million Barbies out there in the world.
That's true. So I know, Guido, both of these characters have had big histories in comics, but we're not going to really. Maybe we'll save that for a future episode.
Yeah, but there's other media. It's interesting. They're similar because they're both IPs that have been pretty tightly controlled by their owners, and their owners are the corporations where they were created. So they haven't passed hands, they haven't been bought, they haven't been split up, and they are hugely licensed, but very tightly controlled. So for Barbie, she has had a large presence, of course, in the license of books and apparel and music and cosmetics and video games and a lot more. There are apparently 16 classic animated films starting at the relatively late date of 2001.
Yeah,
Perhaps the advent of computer animation helped with it.
I was super surprised that we didn't really have a Barbie film, as far as I could see, until 2001 for a character that premiered many years earlier.
Yeah, and so then there's another 20 or so animated films through 2017. There's a Netflix partnership that was started for Barbie and Stacy to the Rescue, and more is apparently on the way. But in terms of that live action film, which we'll get into, there were some rumors of development dating back to 2009 from Sex and the City writer Jenny Bix, later from Juno writer Diablo Cody. Then a few years after that, 2016, Amy Schumer's attached, later Anne Hathaway. Finally, 2018, Margot Robbie, but perhaps with Patty Jenkins of Wonder Woman fame directing. And in 2019, Greta Gerwig and Noah Baumbach came on board. So that's I'd say that's a small amount of time in movie development land. First of all, the fact that it only had rumblings starting in 2009, but then also for those two to be on board in 2019, knowing that the pandemic started shortly after, and that movie is out in 2023.
Totally.
So
and I remember the Amy Schumer announcement. That was like the one that was like, ooh, that's perfect casting. But I'm still glad we got the movie we got, of course.
Yeah. And Barbie has made over $1 billion worldwide at this point, recording. The highest grossing film by a woman ever, the highest grossing Warner Brothers film ever domestically. It's going to surely keep breaking records because they're re-releasing it in IMAX in a few weeks. And so this movie is wild. And there are, as you mentioned, comics with some pretty famous creators, but we're not discussing those today, so maybe another day.
Well, Mario's on-screen life is, I'm going to say, a little weirder than Barbie's.
It is more varied.
Yes, very varied. His first appearance outside of video games was in animated form on Saturday Supercade in 1983, alongside such characters as Frogger and Donkey Kong. And then in 1989 was the premiere of the Super Mario Bros. Super Show. This featured animated Mario sequences as well as animated Legend of Zelda segments, but it became definitely probably much more well-known, or at least that's how I remember it, for its live-action framing sequences, which featured the wrestler Captain Lou Albano as Mario and Danny Wells as Luigi. Yep. And I don't know if you agree, Guido, these sequences really give you very hard public access vibes to me.
Yeah, and they actually feel like two different shows, which is fun. I mean, the animated parts I think are great, but they are like kiddie cartoons, and then the live action ones are strange and definitely akin to stuff like Pee-wee or Elvira.
Yeah, we've been exploring some Pee-wee and some Ernest, and I think they're definitely all of the same ilk, because the live action sequences featured cameos by a huge amount of people, but some of them were Patrick Dempsey, Norman Fell, Ernie Hudson, Sergeant Slaughter, Vanna White, Cyndi Lauper, Moon Zappa, and of course, as you mentioned already, Elvira. And then in 1993, things got even weirder, because then Mario came to the big screen with Super Mario Brothers, starring Bob Hoskins, John Leguizamo as the plumbers, Dennis Hopper as King Koopa, the weirdo outsider musician Mojo Nixon as Toad. They wanted Tom Waits, but I guess they couldn't afford him, so they got Mojo Nixon. And that film was directed by the people behind the cult TV show Max Headroom. Many A-listers like Danny DeVito turned it down. And that film was really met with a lot of confusion over its dark tone, the fact it really doesn't look like the video game at all, feel like the video game. Did not do well at the box office, has since, though, has really been kind of reevaluated by fans. And now
you just have to treat it, I think, as something different. I mean, I loved it. I was 12 years old. I saw it in the theater. I was a big fan of it, but it's definitely telling that I've never rewatched it past.
I'm curious to rewatch it.
Early adolescence. So
no,
it could be good, could be bad, but it's telling that I don't remember, even though I loved it when it came out. So
I think I had the general thoughts when it came out was like, this doesn't look like Mario at all, so why am I watching this movie? But now I think I might appreciate it for that reason. But I think that the kind of the stink of that movie kind of held over Mario in film world for quite some time. He's kind of really finally come back, of course, this year with this new movie from the creators of Teen Titans Go. And then there are lots of Nintendo comics, including Mario, that fetch quite a pretty penny in the market, but we are going to cover those on another day.
Maybe.
Maybe.
Not today.
Well, for now, we are going to throw on our raccoon costume and fly into the stratosphere of exploring multiversity.
I am your guide through these vast new realities. Follow me and ponder the question, what if?
And today we are asking the question, what if Barbie and Super Mario Brothers blew away Hollywood with multiversal mayhem?
They really, I mean, they kind of ended Hollywood, right now.
It's true. They have kind of ended. Yes, they have ended Hollywood. But first up is the Super Mario Brothers movie from Universal, Illumination, and Nintendo. Came out this April 2023.
It's directed by Aaron Horvath and Michael Jelinek, written by Matthew Fogel, produced by Chris Melandandri, Shigeru Miyamoto, voices of Chris Pratt, Charlie Day, amongst many others. So before we dive too far in, what was your first impression? And I'll note we saw this late. We did not see this when it came. We actually saw this after Barbie in sequence. So we were late to the Super Mario explosion that also seemed to take the studio by surprise. I remember lots of news about like the amount of money it was making being surprising. But what did you think?
And a lot of people were like, Chris Pratt, he's not really, that's a weird choice. But I actually really enjoyed the movie a lot. I thought it was a lot of fun. As a player of the game, I thought it's full of Easter eggs, which is great. Is it a movie that surprised me or I'm going to want to go back and watch maybe even one more time? Maybe not, but I thought it was a perfectly lovely Friday, Saturday night flick to throw on. What about you?
Yeah, I think I have the same level of fondness for it. I think one of the things, well, the Easter eggs are great. I like that they
really
operate on multiple levels, but don't take away from the film. And that's something that I think is true for both of these movies we're talking about. So I think there's something in that and the multiverse, which I want to explore a little more. But one of the things that took me by surprise in the movie was its epic fantasy feeling.
Yeah.
Like it had these worlds and these species and these characters and even some rules in the world that I want to know more about. I was watching and I was like, oh, that cute little wizard thing. I want a movie about them. And what, I don't remember those penguins very well. I want to see them. Like it made me want more, which I think for me, good epic fantasy world building does that because it means I'm interested in facets of the world.
Yeah, the opening sequence actually reminded me a lot of Thor Love and Thunder, that opening, because you get that opening battle sequence there where Thor and the Guardians are trying to save that one alien race. And I kind of got that same thing here where, now we're introduced right away, not to the Toad Kingdom, the Mushroom Kingdom, but to these penguins. And I think it did do a great job there of really building up this world and kind of embracing the Lord of the Rings-ness almost. You almost get a Sauron or wherever Sauron lives, from where Bowser lives in this place, all molten lava
Yeah.
and that kind of thing.
Mount Doom.
Yeah, that Mount Doom. Yes, of course. And I was surprised. I mean, I guess I shouldn't have been surprised that it was a multiversal story, because I guess we don't really know how does Mario, this plumber from Brooklyn, end up in the Mushroom Kingdom. But I'm curious, like, did you want more backstory on the creation, the connection between these two worlds? We also know, like, Princess Peach probably came from Earth, but it's never really explained.
Well, I'd call it more multidimensional than multiversal.
Mm-hmm.
And it's interesting because I think this is going to be one of the pieces of data I have for my grand thesis on the shift in Hollywood. But I guess the question then it begs is, what's the difference? What's the difference between a multidimensional story and a multiversal story? And I'd say, for argument's sake, there really isn't one. I think we have in many past episodes argued about differences because, you know, in comics there are always tons of dimensions, but an alternate universe tends to like have much bigger rules, bigger stakes, or contort something about the prime universe. So I think this story is a little more on the multi-dimensional side. But yeah, the warp pipe definitely has potential for a quote unquote multiverse here. Like you said, if Peach has, not Peach, Daisy.
No, Peach in
right?
this.
Oh, it's Peach. If Peach has been taken from Earth to the kingdom, right, then we do have this rich backstory to explore of the warp pipe being used to conquer different dimensions and stuff. So yeah, I'm very interested in that multidimensionality, if that's a word, of
Yeah.
it, slash
Like, who built
multiversity
those
of it.
those pipes? That's I
Well,
feel
that
like
I don't think we're ever
story.
going to get in the story.
Oh, I don't know. I mean, that could be a good story for the next movie. Like, who built this connection between the two worlds? Like, was it just like an unseen? Was it Miyamoto? Did he just the unseen from the hand
They go
of God?
meta and they just they have Miyamoto as the hand of God. I could see them doing that.
Yeah, and it's making me think you've got like multi-dimensional stories, multiversal stories, and time travel stories, and they all like intersect in little ways, but they also have different rules. That's ultimately like our major project, I guess, of the podcast is like come up with an overall thesis or a handbook is like explaining each of the three of those different storytelling types.
Yeah.
And I thought the other thing here that was I found interesting was the multi-dimension, the other dimension, other world, does not stay a secret, because Bowser then comes into, I guess, what is basically our world, and everyone knows about it. And I'm curious where that could go in another one. Is like, oh, now everyone knows about it. And I feel like that's even another subgenre of these stories, is like, now everyone knows about the multiverse or multi-dimension. What do they do about it now? Do people want to go as like, do they want to be tourists to the Mushroom Kingdom?
Yeah, and I'm curious if any of the later games, which I should have added in the intro, and I think this is true for you too. I haven't played past retro games, so like mid 90s perhaps, and I've replayed some of those or will play them in bits and pieces, but I haven't played too many of the modern. There was a Wii one I tried. So, but my point is, I'm curious if any of the games like Galaxy or Universe or these different games that are out there ever do that, ever put a real world take on it, or ever try to like fuse together different aspects of the lore. I'm just not sure, but there's definitely potential with the way they constructed it in the movie, and I can't imagine we won't have a sequel.
Yeah, no, and the 90s movie really had a very similar plot device as well. They could have just kind of set the whole thing in the Mushroom Kingdom, but they also played with this multidimensional. But yeah, so if
I think
you
it's
do...
probably you probably need it in a Mario Brothers story, because you have these two plumbers from Brooklyn.
Yeah,
so
how
you
do they
can't
get there?
just
Yeah.
set it in a. You can't just like go to the Mushroom Kingdom, because then you're like, what are these two people doing here and why?
Yeah.
So
No,
you
totally.
have to have a multi-dimensional story, I think, with the Mario Brothers.
Yeah, built in. And so if you've played those later games and want to let us know, you can write to us on our email or hit us up on social media. But why don't we go to the movie that's on everybody's lips? This gigantic blockbuster known only as Barbie. And that is from Warner Brothers Heyday Films, Lucky Chap Entertainment, NBGG Pictures, and of course Mattel from July 2023.
It's directed by Greta Gerwig, who co-wrote it with Noah Baumbach. It's produced by David Heyman, Margot Robbie, Tom Eckerly, Robbie Brenner, and stars Margot Robbie, Ryan Gosling, and so many other amazing people too. And all right, I don't know how to start this.
Well,
Overall thought, but my gosh.
Yeah, I'll say I think there's this movie. As soon as I saw it, it felt like there's only a few movies every few years that are really going to be the movie that you think about a few years from now. And I was thinking like, okay, like The Shape of Water was a Best Picture winner, but are you really thinking about The Shape of
And
Water?
everyone was talking about it for like a month or two.
Exactly.
But
And then
now
like
it's gone.
Top Gun Maverick, like huge movie at the box office. Are people really going to be talking about that like years later? But this, like, it reminded me, the movie I thought in my head was like Get Out, actually, because like maybe it's something about satire as well, but like those movies are instant classics. 25, 30 years from now, people are going to be treating those movies as the movies we think about from 30 years ago.
Well,
That's
what's
for me.
true is they don't just hit the zeitgeist, but they operate on many levels. And what's true for both of them, and I think this is always the thing that will be cemented in culture, and I always think about Buffy in my history of this, is the things that like not only as a fan can you obsess, but like academics can do stuff with.
Totally.
People who like to think, because even those of us who are not academics, who are not cultural critics, who are not sociologists, who are not doing this kind of work, enjoy thinking. A lot of us do. And these are all products, Get Out, Buffy 30 years ago, and now Barbie, where you can think so much about the material in so many different ways. And that's why it will exist. But not only that for this movie, because that makes it sound heavy-handed, but I think this is the most fun version of that ever to be made in the history of the world. I think this is the best 50-50, like smart, has something to say, and fun movie that's just ever been made. And I loved it. It's like a gender studies class in a super fun, wild, zany movie.
Yeah, totally agree. And it's funny, like, I think it's a thing that Get Out does, and I think Everything Everywhere All at Once does for me as well, where like you can really think about it, there's stuff to study, but it's putting it in the package of a horror movie or an action movie or a fish out of water comedy in like Barbie's case. Almost like it's taking those really complex ideas but like putting them in this other super fun, wild, fun package.
Yeah, it's masterful.
Now, on the multi-dimensional, multiversal element, I thought one thing that was really interesting about this movie was there's some people that know about this other world and some people that don't. So, like America Ferrara and her family, the general population does not know about Barbie Land, but like basically everyone, it seems, who works at Mattel does. So, like, what did you kind of think about that there's like some people who know about this world and there's some people that don't?
Well, it's funny, I hadn't thought about that point as in and of itself being somewhat meta, but I'll now make it meta. The movie is quite meta textual. But because what my thesis in this episode is, what I have observed about these two movies, and I think some people might think I'm coming late with this, but I don't think I am. I think I'm right, frankly. Which is, I think these two movies show us that we have passed the point of critical mass on multiversal storytelling. That the world now can just understand and accept it. That the genre, if we're calling multiversal storytelling a genre, that had been so well developed in superhero storytelling, and as big as superhero movies had come, was still relegated to superhero storytelling. Everything Everywhere All at Once I'd say was like the first crack in that and sort of broke through, hit people, but was still on the like edge of a mainstream thing. These two movies are completely mainstream, completely digestible. Everyone and anyone has and will see them, likely. And your point you just made about in the movie that some people know about Barbie Land, some people don't, and you just accept it, right? We never need to have some moment with America Ferrera where she's like completely shocked that this could be happening and she needs some rational explanation. No, she just accepts it. And I think that's what, to me, these two movies are telling us audiences are now ready to do, or at least content creators are ready to do for audiences, which is just say, we can just accept it. We can just accept Barbie Land, and that's it. We don't need to explain it. It doesn't really matter. In the movie, it doesn't matter. Yes, Mattel knew, Mattel kept it a secret, but as soon as other people know, they don't question it, they don't care, they just move on with their lives. And I think that's how we as audiences now can deal with multidimensionality, multiversal storytelling.
Yeah, and maybe it needed to be a property like Barbie that everyone knows. So when these characters like America Ferrera's daughter like hears about Barbie, like she knows who Barbie is, and then maybe she can even conceptualize, okay, then there's a Barbie land where they all live. It's almost something that we've all thought about as kids, where like it's kind of the basis of Toy Story, right? Like when we're gone, our toys are conversing. Only in that movie they're talking in our reality and not in like another reality like they kind of are here, but it's almost something that we've all thought about a little bit. Barbie's all a character that we know, so maybe this was the perfect movie property to really crack that code for everybody.
Well, and because of what you're saying, I think because not everyone in the movie knows, that's sort of what makes it, I don't know if it's accessible, but that's putting our world in this movie. Whereas the Avengers, it's slightly adjacent to our world. All sci-fi movies are like near future, slight variations on our world. But what this movie has done is it's said like our world exists. Oh, and there's this other little world over here, and the two can connect. So it almost places like our reality in the text of the story. So I think that might be one of the powerful things. And I think you're right. It had to be Barbie who did that. It had to be something people know and are familiar with, both in the movie and in our world. That had to be true.
Now, would you want more even explained about Barbie Land? Like, we get a little bit of info from the narrator at the beginning of the film, but like, would you want to know more about like why this place even exists, or like the rules there, or exploring? Is there a Mount Doom of Barbie Land that we haven't really explored? Like, would you want that?
Absolutely not. No. I think the reason it works so well for me, and the reason I imagine it's so accessible to people, and the reason I think it's like indicative of this tipping point that we've reached, is that you don't need that. Not only do you not need that, but I think in some cases that would take away from the fun of it. It would take away from the depth of it, perhaps, because then like I'd be able to relegate it to some rational other place. I mean, it's almost like in Everything Everywhere All at Once, which is a great third movie to bring in this discussion. There's a rational explanation given, like a pseudoscientific explanation given for how you can traverse the multiverse, but there is never an explanation given for like why this suddenly happens now, or why it ever is allowed to happen.
True.
Like there's no origin given. And I think an origin would also take away from this aspect of Barbie Land, that it just exists. And we can sort of think maybe it has to do with imagination, and that's sort of the realm of imagination, and everything that big ideas that humans have dreamed up have become personified in some other realm. Or, that's what I like to imagine it is.
Yeah, me too.
But I don't want that explained to me. Like even the Ruth Handler scenes.
Like, why is she a ghost there? We don't really know. Yeah.
Why does she have this quote unquote office in Mattel that Barbie can see? And can anyone else ever see it? Is she actually there? Is she another figment of imagination that people can see or not? They can clearly see her at the end when she's in Barbie land. So it's, I like not having an origin of it, because I mean, obviously you need something to be really well developed to not have an origin and be effective. And I think this is that. It's so well developed that I'm good.
Well, let us jump in our convertible, into our snowmobile, into our boat, into our roller skates, and head into the world of pondering possibilities.
Will the future you describe be averted, averted, averted?
So, Guido, what are we talking about for our pondering possibilities?
Well, let's just talk about these characters or the future of these stories, both specific to Mario and Barbie, and then more loosely inspired or influenced. And I just talked for a while with my thesis. So why don't you talk about what you think these two mean for the future?
Well, I think for terms of like seeing Barbie on screen or a continuation of this universe, I know Greta Gerwig has said that she really put every idea she possibly had on this into this movie, and that she doesn't really want a sequel. And I'm of the same way. I think like actually going back to like Get Out and Everything Everywhere All at Once are those movies we could continue to go back to. Yes, but what also makes them so powerful is that they are standalone. And I think it'd be great to just leave this world here and maybe find other ways to explore the Barbie verse, taking this as inspiration, but going in a different direction. Like, I'd love to see maybe some of the aesthetic and style and tone of the Greta Gerwig world, but do it in animation. What do you think about something like that, that kind of takes some of the elements that we've been introduced, but putting them into a different world, maybe even comics?
I don't know. It would be hard because it would be canon. It would be hard to do. You'd have to remove stereotype Barbie out because she's human, right? So you'd want to keep it, unless you do a prequel story. But what I can't tell, and I'm okay not being able to tell this, I can't tell if I want a story set entirely in Barbie land. And it would have to be, because you're retreading that story or you're disrupting that story if you tell some other story that has to do with the intersection of Barbie land to our world. So I imagine you'd need a story set in Barbie land. And then I wonder if a Barbie fan could watch this movie and take all of the other Barbie stuff we described in history as canon. Maybe it all happened in Barbie land.
There could be a multiverse even within Barbie land. Like Barbie land, then there's another multiverse where Barbie is a professional woman living in Wisconsin, perpetually engaged to Ken. So that's a whole other astronaut world.
Well, I don't know. It's because I guess this is also the cool thing I'm just realizing about the device where they're all Barbie is like they've sort of built the multiverse into Barbie land, where it's not actually a separate universe, but it's almost like the variants of Loki. But on a much bigger scale, where it's just like all of these, the astronaut Barbie you had as a kid exists and it's here in Barbie land. It's just not Margot Robbie. It's like the other one. So there's all of those different versions built in, which is cool. But I don't know that there's story potential in those as much as I mean, Issa Rae as president was one of the most wonderful things in the movie, but I don't need more of that.
Now, we mentioned at the top that sales of Barbie before this movie had dipped a bit, probably because there's so much competition from other things, and I'm sure they have or will be going up.
Well, because we've started buying them, I know for a fact that they started going up. So.
Well, that was kind of my question, is like, did this movie make you interested more in the world of Barbie as a whole? Okay.
Wildly. Oddly, wildly, unexpectedly. And I'm a moderately easy mark, I'd say.
I'd say.
Give me some good world building and I will want to consume. Like I will want that world. But for that to have happened with Barbie is, I'd say, pretty extraordinary, because we were at a yard sale yesterday and I was digging through the box of Barbies. Like you and I, we bought King Kong Barbie and it's sitting on our shelf. Like I never imagined I'd be willing to own Barbies. And now I bought a book that's a catalog of the history of collector's edition Barbies. So I can basically go through it and decide which ones I want to track down on eBay and buy. Like,
yeah. And we should clarify, Barbie is not a giant gorilla, but it is the woman that King Kong,
but in the fist of a King Kong.
In the fist,
like,
yes.
It's so cool. But yeah, it's extraordinary to me. I mean, would I want to read a Barbie storybook, or would I want to read a Barbie comic, like you said?
Yeah.
No, absolutely not. But now I am totally into buying some of the dolls. They're pretty, they're cool, and I just feel a connection to that world that I've never felt before.
Yeah, and there's a Netflix movie that is going to be coming out, and I'm just curious if it's called Barbie and Stacy to the Rescue. I'd imagine it's going to be for kids, but I mean, it's animated.
It's
but
going to definitely be for.
But see, that's not something that you're going to like.
No.
You're not going to tune into Netflix to watch Barbie and Stacy.
Absolutely not. Which I'm fine with watching kids cartoons, but that absolutely has no appeal to me as into the world as I am at this point. That does not appeal to me.
Well, what about our little plumber brothers? Because
what do you think? Where do you think that's going? I mean, that's an easier one to have a sequel, to have this ongoing story like that. It sort of sets itself up. But what do you think it's going to do, and how multiversal is it going to be?
Well, I think they really set up a lot, as you said, and we were mentioning a potential with a sequel by really setting up what is Peach's origin story. How did she get to the Mushroom Kingdom? Is she actually human? So I think that would be really interesting to explore. So I definitely think we'll see a sequel. And it was so long before we got Mario in a film, in between the failed live action film and this one. So I don't think we're going to be waiting that long for a new sequel. But I'm wondering too, in terms of multiversal or multidimensional, could the next movie even be a backdoor pilot, if you will, to a Nintendo connected universe?
I do always wonder if, like, Metroid or Link from Zelda or Kid Icarus, which he's playing in Mario Brothers, I wonder if these Nintendo properties we know they could coexist, because again, Nintendo has always kept a great deal of control of their IP. There's an example of this in Captain N the Games Master from the 80s, where they overlap and link up their different worlds. But I wonder if it should be. What do you think? I mean, should Link be in a world with Mario, or should Zelda just be its own world?
I think it maybe should just be its own world, because yes, as you were mentioning, this new Super Mario World was very mythological and had a lot of kind of Game of Thrones, Lord of the Rings kind of feel in terms of expansiveness, but that doesn't mean that Zelda has to be in like another kingdom over there. I would like to see that be its own world rather than struggling to like interconnect. How is like Star Fox in this world too? Like you could easily put him
like
in
Metroid,
talking animals.
I mean, I guess Metroid would have to be on some alien planet, but
but I think they should almost be their own world, and maybe this was more just functioning to like ease people back into the world of what a more family oriented video game movie adaptation could really feel like, and really also staying true to the video game, because I'm sure there were many people over the years saying you can't really just adapt Super Mario to the screen, it's silly. And that's what exactly they did. And it's the second biggest movie of the year. We're just gonna have power-ups, we're gonna have him in the raccoon suit, we're just gonna
or the little
do the video
homages
game.
Even to like Mario Kart. You and I both played Mario Kart and Mario Party over the years, and they do such a good job of pulling that in without like turning it into they could have done a standalone Mario Kart race car movie and it probably would have been awful. Instead, it was fun to have sequences that remind you so much of that game and that the world of that game and the mechanics of that game, but within this movie.
Now, I think we might see spin-offs with like the Donkey Kong characters and stuff like that. That's within kind of I guess that's the thing about Nintendo. They do have their own interconnected worlds of like Mario and Donkey Kong and stuff like that. And then you do have other characters like Link and Zelda and Samus that are completely separate.
Yeah. And so moving away from both Mario and Barbie, do you think I'm right? Do these two movies tell us that we have moved past the tipping point and we're just in a post multiversal world?
I think so, because you made a good point referencing some of the other movies, and I'm thinking there's that big sequence in, I think it's Endgame, right, where they kind of need to explain time travel again and what they're doing, and I think you could almost get by now just like skipping that altogether, because we just all, as you were saying, we just embrace this device, and I think we're at peak, but I don't think it's also fully been mined yet either.
No, I think at this point what'll happen, I imagine this happened with time travel stories, maybe even with like Back to the Future at some point or something. I'm not a cinema historian in that way, but I think we're at peak. We've passed the tipping point. I think that doesn't mean they're going away, nor does that mean they're going to be at the top of everything. It means there will just now always be multiversal stories. They're just going to always be a part of some stories that get told, and they're no longer relegated to even the large fringe that it was, but the fringe of superhero stories. They're now able to be in anything, thanks to Everything Everywhere All at Once, Mario and Barbie.
And now, before we wrap up, Guido, I had one final question for you. So, of course, we had Barbenheimer this year taking over everyone. It was the word on everyone's lips was Barbenheimer. But of course, today we were doing Barbie and Mario. So what would it be for you? Would it be Marbie or Barrio? What would their couple name be?
It can't be Barrio because that's the neighborhood in Spanish.
That's true.
So it has to be Barbio, and I think it's Barbio.
Barbio. Okay. There we go.
How about you?
So, oh no, I love it. Barbio. There we go. So that was the new trend, the new celebrity couple of Barbio.
That'll be the name of the movie when they cross over in 20 years.
Which is just inevitable onto itself. So.
So that then is a wrap, dear watchers. That is enough. There is no other giveaway this week. We do have that one final one lingering, and I recommend you listen to the last few episodes if you have no idea what we're talking about with our giveaways.
Yes, and I have been Robio.
And I have been Ken. The reading list is in the show notes. You can follow us on all social media at Dear Watchers.
Leave a review wherever you listen to podcasts. We'll be back soon with another trip through the multiverse.
In the meantime, in the words of Watchu, it's a dream house, mother effers.